Did you know ASBN, America's Small Business Network, is now available on your TV? That's right. ASBN is now streaming on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire Stick, and available for download in the App Store. Scan the QR code to download the ASBN app today. This is The Roadmap with Lee Heisman.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to The Roadmap, exclusively here on ASBN.com. I'm Lee Heisman, and every week we bring you some of the brightest entrepreneurs, CEOs, and business owners who are climbing the ladder, scaling their businesses, and thinking one day how to exit stage left. Today, I'm here with a very good friend of mine, Mr. Rick Hale, who is the CEO of the Heart of ATL Group for Keller Williams Realty. Now, I did say that correctly, CEO. That stands for Chief Energy and Education Officer, as well as a wonderful author as well. We're going to talk about later in the show. Rick, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Lee. I appreciate being here.
Absolutely. Well, Rick, I want to give our audience a little bit of context about who you are and what you've grown. If they haven't looked up Keller Williams or the Heart of Atlanta, you have I think you have a total of 8 locations, 1,200 real estate agents that work under you. And last year alone, in 2022, you did over $4 billion of transactions. Is that accurate?
Close to it. 12,000 units. We helped 12,000 people find a new home.
My gosh. Well, you're the kind of guy that our audience wants to listen to, because not only have you grown this business and you've taken your career to so many different levels, I know our audience wants to know what your roadmap has been.
Sure.
So talk to us a little bit about the real estate business, right? Everybody knows it. Everybody thinks they could jump into real estate or be a part of it as well. What are some of the pieces of advice you would say to people that might have an interest in this space?
We'll take a hard look at your core genius, the skills you bring, your energy, your passion, how much you love working with people, because it's incredibly hands-on, incredibly personal. And it takes an incredible amount of drive and commitment. And most people underestimate what it takes to succeed in our industry, and they overestimate how fast they'll make money. And that's a flaw for many cases. I mean, 80% of our industry fails in the first 2 years. So if the graduating class today, 2 years from now, 80% are no longer present. And they're just, typically they're not well funded. They don't have enough money in the bank to sustain what it takes to generate their first sale and momentum in the business. And in some cases, they're in the wrong environment, and they're not, nurtured and grown and educated in how to run a business and not just, sell product, if you will.
So, that is true for most businesses, right? It's the staying power. Everybody wants that immediate return. They think they get that immediate itch scratch, but that isn't the case, especially in real estate. So give me one of the larger mistakes you've seen from agents, that 20% that can make it after the first 2 years. What's maybe one of the biggest mistakes you see happen?
So there's a long list, but I think probably the greatest mistake is thinking that it'll come quickly and easily, and also thinking that they can do it part-time and work their way into it when it really requires a full-time commitment. And consumers today are savvy and smart, and they know the difference between professional and amateur, and professional realtors are really the top 20%. The rest are really pretending and playing in the sandbox, putting it mildly and honestly.
Very good. Well, I know that your group provides that education for people, and that's kind of how you've cultivated that many agents that work directly under you and the success you've had at your entire firm. But now you're spreading beyond those 1,200 agents. And I have to hold up here real quick this book. This is your book, of course, Stop Settling. And I've always talked about, in my life, most of my choices, not only in business but personal, they're really about I want to have a regret-free life. Right? Most of my choices are to avoid regret, not necessarily gain something. And this is what your book's about. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, happy to. So a few things happened when I decided to write a book. And I believe that your subconscious brain is nothing more than, it does 2 things primarily. One, keeps you alive and inspires people to reproduce, to keep humanity moving forward. The other half is just solving riddles and helping you confirm, who, what, where, and how the world exists. And whatever riddle you give it's the riddle it works on. And I think too many of us spend time invested in things that don't necessarily lead us to a higher, better version of ourselves. When I decided to write the book, it started out as just a simple letter to my kids. I thought, man, how cool would it be, as I thought through, my family and my father and his father and his father, if I go upstream 4 or 5 generations, I can't even name them by name, much less recount anything about their existence and their story. And so there's a piece of this that was spawned by the idea I'd like a little bit of my legacy perpetuated accurately. And so it started there. And the interesting thing about that subconscious brain that I mentioned earlier, when you decide and commit to something, that's the riddle it's going to solve. And so I decided, well, if I'm going to be worthy and authentic and in integrity, which I define integrity as when your inside voice aligns with your outward behavior, I better do something that's valuable to humanity and to my kids in that story. And so it changed some of the way, the lens at which I looked at things. And it also just motivated me to pay attention. And so the idea was spawned 10 years ago. And it was really about holistic success, because you asked about where people fail in real estate. The interesting thing is there's some really successful people in life, and specifically in real estate, that have it figured out financially in their businesses, but their personal lives are in shambles. They're not balanced to the extent that they're finding holistic success. And so one of the things that I've always coached to is counterbalance. There's no such thing as balance, but you do have the ability when you get out of balance to swing back. And the only way I know to do it is purposefully and by design. And so inside the book, one is a little bit of my story, because I wanted it told correctly 5 generations from now. And the other half of it is an operations manual for crafting the perfect you 5 years from now. And so that's the construct in the book. I think people overestimate annual goals, tend to come up short, reset, recalibrate, New Year's resolution, and then fall prey to yet another year of disappointment somewhere along the line when they set their goals out of reach. And in my experience, I've found that people tend to overestimate a year, underestimate 5, and some goals that are really worthy of life change and self-improvement and self-actualization require time. And that time is more like a crock pot and not a microwave. You said earlier, instant gratification. If it's that easy and that quick, it doesn't have sustained energy or effect or impact on you or the universe. And so I've come up with this strategy where I've broken it down into bite-sized pieces for how to make sure that you live this regret-free life and not just, nail it in a few categories and fail in others. And so realtors, by virtue of being on call 24/7 and working really, really hard, the successful ones anyway, it occurred to me that it's really smart to have guardrails and guideposts and awareness to make sure that counterbalance happens before it's irreversible.
So, you did mention something about self-actualization, which is that's the top of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If you don't have, you don't think about shelter if you don't have food or water. You don't think of food or water if you don't have air. Is that part of your thought process, that pyramid, that hierarchy of needs?
Well, so for me, part of this again is how do you have a regret-free life? And I want to get clear that regrets aren't mistakes. I think a successful life requires mistakes, not just part of it. We don't get better until we fail forward or make mistakes, learn, grow, and then we're better equipped to conquer the next opportunity. Regrets to me feel lifelong and more permanent. And so I do think there's a stacking effect, but I also think it's easy to get distracted by life and distracted by all of the chaos and the noise. And so the idea is that if I can break down your life into 12 categories and you strategically deploy literally a working strategy, you're not going to leave anything behind and wake up with a regret. And it also gives you the ability, they're like dials on your dashboard. And when you can see them all omnipresent daily and visually, when things are starting to reach a danger zone and you can take care of it again before it becomes dire.
So, Rick, you being the expert of growing your business the way that you have, the scale and size of it, again, still blown away about your success. You're always so humble.
Thank you.
You come about and you write this book, this wonderful novel, I'll call it, this roadmap, if I may. But, you're also human. And a lot of viewers out there might say, well, this guy's got it together. It's pretty easy for him. Does he have any regrets? Have you had any regrets along the way that, you said, I need to write this book for that reason as well? Talk about some of your personal experiences which helped guide this book.
I love that you asked the question. And one of the things that I've found is for me to connect with people on a human level that really matters, I have to be vulnerable. And, authentic, I think, is sometimes a term that's overused. But all that means is being truthful, sincere, and willing to admit, your glaring flaws. And maybe they're not glaring to you. But yeah, I've had my share. The thing about it is, I think how you define things and how you label things dictates the impact on your future. And so when you say, have you had regrets? Absolutely not. Have I made mistakes? Absolutely. The differentiation for me is that a mistake is something you can take care of, fix, cure, or make better. A regret, again, I define it as a more permanent situation. It's that last day on earth when you look down and you're probably not clutching a spreadsheet with your, all the important numbers from your business. It's probably you're clutching the conversations and the people around you and the experiences that you had because of the success in your business. I mean, you have to fund your life, but it shouldn't be the only focal point. And I think taking advantage of all 12 categories creates a holistic story to be proud of and a legacy to carry on.
So, first off, that is so true. And everything you said is words for wisdom for our listeners and viewers out there. But there had to be an inflection point where you didn't feel that way. You're exactly right. With that lens today, that's exactly why you wrote the book. And you're right. Regrets, they're just negative. There's no point in focusing on that negativity versus what can I learn from this? But was there an inflection point where you didn't, there's no way you grew up thinking like that all the time. Where was that point where you said, okay, I need to change my mindset to this mentality?
So everyone needs an advocate in their life and someone to be their cheerleader and their rally cry. There's a chapter in the book where I talk about finding, you're the average of the 3 to 5 people you spend the most time with. And the impact of your tribe and your inner circle really often dictates who you become and how you evolve. And so in my story, so if you were specifically digging for, fundamental mistakes, at one point I did a land deal where we assembled 6 lots in Buckhead to convert them to 13. Unfortunately, we did this in 2006 and rolled into 7. It ended up going back to the bank. There was a strategic default involved that resulted in a $2.2 million judgment on me personally while going through a divorce. So
oh my gosh.
We've all been there. Like it's not that like life's going to happen. And it's what you make of it. And I don't want to sound utopian and scripted. And I had a really difficult season in that period of time. It was heartbreaking, and I had to put on my game face and show up for work because I had, 1,200 people that I was responsible for, and I'm like the parent, and I love them as much as any group of people on the planet. And at the same time, inside I was eroding and rotting, and it took some serious soul searching, some spiritual mentorship. It took a recalibration and a reset. And at the end of it, the silver lining, which I talk a lot about, again, life happens for you, not to you. The silver lining was I woke up committed to being a better human being, a better father, a better husband, again, given the opportunity. And things really played out well for me. And I have an amazing family and 2 additional sons that I didn't have, and a wife that I adore, who adores me the same way. And it's a different experience. And, due to, some fault of my own, but reality shows up. And the point is I made lemonade out of it. And I also became more aware of my own flaws in that experience. So that's a big one. But back to the advocate story, you said, when did you realize? And the interesting thing is I did not grow up self-confident. I didn't grow up in a happy, healthy home and, an environment where we weren't the Leave It to Beavers, on any level. My parents were married and divorced 4 times each. And I spent a year in military school, boarding school when I was 12, crying myself to sleep many nights. And at 16, I took a year off from high school and went to Venezuela, where my mom was living. At 10 years old, she moved to Venezuela. I stayed in the States with my stepfather. And that was the most important year of my life because I realized what true wealth is. And true wealth is the ability to make something of nothing. When I was there, I recognized and realized I traveled with a missionary for 6 weeks along the Colombian border, and I saw what real passion was, what real commitment looked like. And at 16, I was living this, we all have our vision of what the world is, and at 16, we rarely have it figured out, if ever. And watching him preach the gospel and me tagging along, by the way, side note, he didn't speak English. I spoke no Spanish the day I jumped in his car. So there's a whole section in the book. I'll leave that there, other than I realized in that moment at 16 that our country is the land of milk and honey and opportunity. When I came back a year later, I didn't want to kiss the ground like people talk about. I wanted to eat the dirt. I was like, serve me a helping of this, because I can be, have, and do anything. And I also realized that my worst day is someone's best day somewhere.
You're exactly right. So, always have it good. You never know how good you have it till you don't have it anymore.
That's it. It's all about perspective, right?
So before we wrap up, there was something you talked about 5 years is too long, 1 year can be too short. And there's a balancing act there. And what recommendation do you have for entrepreneurs that say, well, where's the balance between how far, being too short-sighted, being too far-sighted? Where do I and how do I find that balance?
So awareness is step 1. And step 2 is communicating with the people around you that you love the most, and making sure that what you think you're doing and where you think you're landing with your energy and the time that you invest, your presence. Being present is a challenge. Listening with absolute connectivity is really hard for most people, especially go-getter entrepreneurs, and I fit into that category. Like I have to really, really turn things off and to be present, because My brain's like, it's like juggling, chainsaws, it feels like some days. And if you fail to do that, you're going to lose relationships. And the problem with relationships is they erode slowly and then suddenly. And so Mark Twain even said, he went bankrupt at one point. He said, he was asked, how did you go bankrupt? He said, slowly, then suddenly. And I think that's also how wealth is built. And that's also how relationships that withstand the test of time are built. And so the idea is this, is that it's okay to put things on a shelf short term, but to live a regret-free life, you can't put aspects of your life that matter on a shelf to the extent that they expire or become irrevocably harmed. And so the idea is awareness. And I think it's also about having, commitment to counterbalance sooner and commitment to, I love this too. The greatest challenges for me at work, it's rarely a what I should do. It's a who I need in my life to make that gap, so that I can gap the game. And whenever there's an issue, it's a who solves it way faster than what. And who also buys back freedom and margin so that you can counterbalance quicker and not feel like all things, hinge on your behavior and your presence.
Well, ending on a high note couldn't have been done any better from those notes. And I recommend definitely for people to go out there and get the book, Stop Settling, because I could listen to you all day. Talking about being present right here. We don't have phones near us, and I'm completely dialed into everything you say. And I hope our audience is the same way. So if people want to follow you more, find a copy of the book, what's the best website? What's the best contact information for you?
Yeah, we do a couple of podcasts a week, and I've got Wisdom Wednesday notes and mentions. So rickhale.com is the number one place. You can also, I'm on Facebook at Rick Hale Leadership. I believe everything rises and falls on leadership, and I believe that every human being is a leader. It's whether you've stepped up and made a difference in your community. So my goal is to elevate consciousness and awareness around being a better human being so that others follow.
That's wonderful. And can they get the book on your website?
Yeah, rickhale.com. It's also on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all the online retailers.
So I have this book plus the signed copy you got me before, so I thank you so much for that.
100%.
Rick, thank you for coming on the show today.
Lee, you're awesome. Thank you, buddy.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us again today. It was an amazing show to me. Rick's words of wisdom go far beyond anything, and I definitely recommend circling back with him. I hope the show was insightful for you. We hope to see you again next week on another episode of The Roadmap.
Thanks for watching The Roadmap with Lee Heisman.